In this video, we're going to be looking in detail at the importing tools in PBR Painter and looking at how to import layers, materials, and masks into your PBR Painter materials. Mostly, we'll be looking at how to do this within the local blend file, and in a separate video, I'll look in detail at how to do this using the asset browser. All right, so let's make a start. When you have your PBR Painter material ready, you can import layers and materials using this import button over here. So when you click this, you'll have an option to import either PBR Painter layers from a different material. You can import folders from other materials. You can import entire materials as layers, or you can even import image textures extracted from other materials. Now I'm going to go through each one of these in detail. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first create an example material using PBR Painter layers. So I'm just going to turn on a few channels just to kind of show the process. And I might even make a couple of different layers just to kind of show you how you can import one or more layers at a time. So I'm just using some different settings in here. And I think I'll leave it at that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this material, create a new material, and I'm going to click the import. And as you can see, now that I have that other material here locally, I can then import layers from that material. So I can import either all the layers or I can select specific layers. So let's see what happens if I select that first layer. As you can see, it's now brought it into this current material. And in doing that, it will create a copy of that layer so that you can freely change the properties of this material without it interfering with that previous material. As I said, you can also choose to import a separate layer, or you can import all layers, which will just add everything from that other material onto the current material. So as you can imagine, this is really powerful and it lets you reuse your layers so you don't have to recreate the same effect every time. So the other thing you can do with a PBR Painter material is you can import folders. Now, I explained folders in a different video, but basically they are a way of grouping together layers in materials like this. And it's a way of organizing your layers into categories. So now that I have that folder, I'm going to go back to that other material and I'm going to click import, but this time I'm going to select folder. As for the layers, I can now select which folder I want, or if you have more than one folder, you can select all folders. Clicking OK. I've now brought that entire folder in, and it's acting in the exact same way as the import for the individual layers. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and remove these layers because I don't need them anymore. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the next import tool, which is letting you import a Principled BSDF material. So this will let you choose any material that you have locally, and it will import it so long as it uses a single Principled shader. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to jump across to the shading tab, get rid of this material again, and create a brand new material. And in this one, I'm going to set up some custom node setup in here. So I might add some random procedural textures. Doesn't matter what you've got here, anything can be in here so long as it feeds into this single Principled shader. And the reason for that is because all of the layers in PBR Painter all go into a single shader. So if you're importing a material, it has to follow that same format. But other than that, you're free to import any materials that you have saved. So let's just demonstrate that process. So I'm going to adjust a few of these parameters in here just to show that this will be copied across. So I'm going to go back to the PBR Painter tab. And now what I'm going to do is swap back to that PBR Painter material. And I'm going to select the Principled BSDF material, and I'm going to select that new material that I created. And when I click OK, as you can see, it's now successfully brought that material in. It's added it as a special type of layer called a custom nodes layer, which is what this little icon represents. And if we have a look inside the shading tab once again, you can see that that material is now here as a layer. And if we go into this one, as you can see, it's now brought those textures in, and it's also adjusted the metallic and the roughness correctly as per the original material. And once again, it adds another way to speed up your workflows and avoid doing the same thing more than once. All right, so the final type of import that you can do for your layers is to import image textures. And what this is going to do is it's going to look at the material that you're referring to, and it's going to find any image textures within that material, and it will pull it out and put it into a standard PBR Painter layer. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to actually use a material that I have saved in my asset browser, and I'm just going to drag that on. And that's just going to replace the material that was already on this mesh. So when I look at the shading tab now, what this material is it's basically just these individual PBR textures that are feeding into this Principled shader. And this is the standard way that these kinds of PBR materials are used in Blender. So it's very common to have a library of these materials saved. And so what this next type of import is going to do is it's going to let you target that material directly and pull out those image textures into a standard PBR Painter layer. So let's have a look. So I'm going to again delete this layer. Now clicking import, now I'm going to go to image textures and I'm going to find that last material, which was this concrete textures. And then I'm going to click OK. And what you'll see is that now it has brought those image textures into PBR Painter. Now you may be wondering why you would have a separate import for image textures. Why don't we just click this and select this and then import it like this as a bunch of nodes? The reason is that by pulling out the image textures, now you have a standard PBR Painter, which gives you access to the full PBR Painter UI, which means you can do all sorts of different things in here, like you can adjust settings for the image, you can apply different color corrections, and you can change the mapping from within the PBR Painter interface. So that's obviously a huge advantage. You can also use a box mapping that's specific to PBR Painter that's actually not available. And basically what this one does is it lets you rotate your textures in the X, Y, and Z independently like that. All right, so that covers everything in terms of importing materials as layers. Now, before I move on to masks, I'm just going to point out that all of these import options are actually available directly from the asset browser. So I'm not going to go into detail about the asset browser in this video, other than showing that if I right-click a material inside here, there is a PBR Painter menu item from which you can click Import Material. If your material is a PBR Painter material, it will allow you to import layers. If it's just a standard Blender Principled BSDF material, you can then choose to either import all the nodes or just the image textures. And as you'll see, it does the exact same thing. So you don't actually have to drag and drop. You can go directly from your assets into a layer in PBR Painter. So as I said, if you have a PBR Painter material like this mossy bricks, what we can do is we can actually select layers or folders and we can import them directly. So what that means is you can actually build up your library of PBR Painter materials and you can reuse them over and over again directly from these assets in a really flexible way to create brand new materials. So in this case, I can import moss. And now what that's done is it's just brought that moss layer from this material and it's just added it onto this concrete textures, including all of the masks that actually come with that layer. All right, now there's one more thing that I forgot to mention before I move on to the mask importing, and that is, as an alternative to importing all of your nodes from a material into a layer in PBR Painter, you can also start with that other material. So in this case, we're starting with this basic material, and you can treat that as your background. And when you open that in PBR Painter, when you click Setup Material, you can tick this box that says Use Current Material as Background, and then optionally you can back up the material as well if you want to save a copy of it. And when we click OK, what that's going to do is it's going to import that in the same way as a layer, so that now this is kind of acting as a background layer. And of course, this is a normal custom nodes layer, so it can be manipulated in the normal ways, but it just saves you going through that extra step of importing it from that other material. Okay, now, as I said, the last thing I want to talk about is importing masks, which can be done in exactly the same way as for layers. And basically, again, you need to click this import button, which when you don't have any masks, it will look like this. And when you do that, you can select any materials that you have locally that have masks. And from that, you can select a layer, and then you can select a specific mask. So you can specify a specific mask, or you can specify the entire mask stack. So for example, I can grab this procedural mask, and that's just then brought that into this current material. So then I can play around with color ramps and use this in this current material. As I said, you can also import the entire mask stack, and this is going to bring every single mask from that existing material. And when you do this, you get this option to also copy the color ramp. So that's going to copy the stack color ramp in here, which I explain in a separate video when I'm explaining how the masking system works. So clicking OK, as we can see, we have now brought in the grunge mask from that layer and also the procedural mask once again. And with that, I'll wrap up the video. So I hope you enjoyed it, hope you got something useful from it, and as always, thanks for watching, and I will hope to catch you in another video. Cheers!